Welcome to Witnessing Christ. Witnessing Christ is a truth and love ministry podcast designed to help biblical Christians witness to their Mormon friends, family, and missionaries. For more Bible-based resources, check out tilm.org. We have all kinds of resources to support you, including classes, witnessing scenarios, books, and so much more. Visit tilm.org today.
Hi, friends. This is Molly.
And Mark Parsons.
And this is the Witnessing Christ podcast.
Molly, thanks for being here today. We just wanted to put together kind of an intro to the Witnessing Christ podcast and talk about why we're doing this. So we've been doing this for a while. Tell us why we're doing this.
Well, we're finding that, podcasting is a great way to communicate, but we really want to help equip Christians to proclaim Christ to their LDS friends. So our LDS friends, they are studying this year the New Testament. Last year was the Old Testament. They receive the periodical Liahona in their mailbox. They love temples. We're just
Parables,
looking at all the things that are important to our LDS friends, the things they're thinking about, and we can talk about those too, and let's show them Christ.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of the things that we're going to be focusing on in the year 2023. We're spending much of our time focused on witnessing Christ from the New Testament. So in 2023, LDS congregations all over the world are walking through the New Testament. Each week they have 3 to 12 chapters of the New Testament assigned that they're reading through, and our plan is on a weekly basis to have a podcast ready for you weeks in advance to listen to and then prepare to have valuable conversations with your friends. Along the way, we're going to be spending some time looking at the LDS magazine periodical, the Liahona. We're going to take some time to work through those articles and give opportunities for witnessing from that. We'll spend some time looking at how to use parables, and finally, how to use the temple and the tabernacle for witnessing.
So one of the, maybe we can call it a motto now, one of the mottos that you have been repeating over and over again is curious, not confrontational. What does that mean when it comes to witnessing?
Yeah, so as we're providing you, the Christian listener, with insights into biblical concepts and insights into LDS theology and at times culture, we are not providing this to you as a weapon to go and then confront your friends and say, hey, I heard on a podcast that you believe this. But this is to allow you to have a curious spirit when you go into those conversations. So rather than using the materials that we give you as a weapon, we're encouraging you to use it as a window into the LDS worldview, so that you can better understand and perhaps be more kind, caring, compassionate, and curious when it comes to those conversations.
And it's very easy to start with curiosity. You can ask questions, and now you've got a conversation going that hopefully you can use to point to Christ.
Yeah, maybe to camp out on that for a little bit. When I was holding the job offer to come and serve with Truth and Love Ministry, I reached out to an ex-Mormon Christian friend, and I asked her, hey, if I take this job, what's one piece of advice that you would give me? And it still resonates in the back of my mind. And she said to build a lot of relational credit before you start to witness. And I thought that was really interesting. I asked her to expand on it, and she says, just ask questions. Be genuinely interested in their lives, where they come from as far as their faith background, and then earn the opportunity to speak. And that's really what we're hoping this podcast can do, is just allow you to have more understanding about your friends, but also lead you to have more questions for them too.
Lots of compassion and patience. So share with us a little bit about what the podcast will include.
Yeah, so each week, if we are walking through the New Testament, we're going to do a brief summary of the chapters and verses, looking usually at themes that stick out. We're going to try and highlight something. If it's lots of parables that are about the kingdom of God, we'll focus on that. If it's stories about people acting in faith. We'll talk about what faith is and what faith does. After we've summarized the chapters, we're going to really just ask each other, do you have any questions about this week? Something that's hard for you as a Christian to explain? And then the part that we hope will be very valuable for you is we're going to look at words, phrases, and theological concepts in each of the week's readings that Mormons are going to view differently because of the lens that they have been provided by their international church body. And then we're going to say, how can we talk about those words, phrases, and theological concepts in a way that proclaims Christ rather than debates Mormonism? And so we want to use this always as an opportunity to proclaim Christ.
And that's just really helpful to keep emphasizing because there's so much to be distracted by, because I want to maybe pick at the Mormon doctors that I think are weird and don't necessarily lead to anything fruitful, but that's a waste of time. We need to get to Christ.
Yeah, so we'll even spend some time on that, talking about here's maybe some parts to avoid or some conversations to avoid that just aren't going to be fruitful and beneficial from our own experience.
So maybe some practical ideas we can brainstorm here. How am I going to get into conversations about the New Testament?
Yeah, I think a simple thing, if you've got a group of LDS friends or missionaries already, say, hey, as I've been learning more about the Mormon Church, I discovered that you're all working through the New Testament right now. Can you tell me about that? And be curious, ask them what they're studying, what this looks like in their sacrament meetings, what it looks like during Sunday morning at their meeting houses, what it looks like in their homes. And they'll be willing to share. And then some practical things is to say, hey, what are you reading this week? And then go on to the LDS website and know in advance what they're reading so that you can be prepared to talk about that with them. We heard from a friend recently who's actually invited his LDS friends to read through the New Testament with him. He said, even hold me accountable to reading the New Testament this year. And they are using the Bible app, one of those just awesome online apps that you can pull up the Bible and actually communicate with your friends through. So the Bible app, they're working through the New Testament together. They're asking each other questions, giving each other commentary, and he's just found it as a really neat way to engage with these men in his community.
I like that, asking them to hold me accountable because they're holding
Gives them
me.
A responsibility.
Yeah. Put the burden on them.
Yeah. And I think, if you're curious, again, what are you studying? No, they want to talk about the Bible. They're going to be impressed that you want to talk about it with them.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fun. The Liahona. How should we use the Liahona podcast?
Yeah, so the Liahona, another one is, it's not a weapon. It's a window into their world. And we're going to be diving into some pretty deep topics and concepts in that. It's probably a little bit harder to bring up so I heard that you have a magazine and I just happened to have bought that one. So I think that one, less of a talking piece, is more of a window into their world. And maybe at times you can bring up specific articles. You could say, hey, I read something recently. Oh, yeah, that's from our magazine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It kind of helps you understand what they're thinking about at any given month because they're talking about that.
Yeah, I see it in the same way where there are times where I will watch a television program that I know my kids watch that is, like a lower rated show that we've given them opportunity to watch it. I'll watch it sometimes even though it doesn't interest me at all, just to know what they're watching. And I won't necessarily bring up a specific episode and say, hey, so what'd you think about this? But some of the topics that come up in those episodes, I'll bring up with them at times.
Worth talking about. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe one of the final things to really think about is, in addition to looking at those words and concepts, is to try and allow you, our witnessing Christian, as well as LDS members, to have a properly focused, what we call anthropology, and a properly focused theology. Every false religion improperly places God and man in this place where they're too close together. And one of the things we want to do as we read through the Bible with them, and as we talk about the Liahona or the temple, is properly place our theology that God is so much higher and greater than us, and our anthropology, our view of man, that it's way too high and it needs to be lowered. And so in each episode, we're going to be really thinking about how we can provide an appropriately balanced view of God, humanity, and then our relationship with one another.
Okay, so really focusing on who is God and who am I, and the distance between.
The distance between us, and how is that distance bridged or gapped?
Why it matters.
Yeah, and finally, just what we'll focus on helping folks say, this verse or this story, like make it your own so that when an opportunity comes up to witness that you can share it.
That helps.
Sounds good. Thank you, Molly, for spending some time giving an intro here. So throughout this year, John Leach and Casey Masters from our ministry will also be joining the conversation. Most of the time, those two are going to be a team. Sometimes the four of us will get together and do a bonus episode.
Friends, we are so grateful for all of you and so happy that God is using you to proclaim his name. We pray for you every day and can't wait to see how God uses you to proclaim his name.
Thanks, Molly. And we'd encourage you, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, that you would subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Leave us some comments. That's a way in which all of the podcast platforms kind of boost the ranking, and then share it with your friends. Let them know if you have found this as a blessing and a benefit for your life of witnessing. They probably will too. Thanks so much, friends. Have a blessed day.
Bye now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Witnessing Christ. Witnessing Christ is a Truth in Love ministry podcast. For more resources, visit tilm.org. If this podcast and other Truth in Love ministry resources have been a blessing to you, consider supporting the mission to proclaim Christ to Mormons and empower Christians to witness by visiting tilm.org/give.